Good morning, Commissioner,
Morning.
Council, Mr. Brownlee. We have Mr. Brownlee here to continue his evidence today, but some issues have arisen over the weekend, and we need a 30-minute adjournment to begin at 10 a.m. hopefully, if we can aim for that right now. While we have some discussions about that, Commissioner, it would be appreciated.
Okay, well, that's fine. Let's stand adjourned then until 10 o'clock.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner, Council, Mr. Brownlee, we're back. I'd like to start off the day in the week with our land acknowledgement. I'd like to open this week of hearing by acknowledging that the city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that the land on which Hamilton sits is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Many of the council appearing on this hearing today are in Toronto, which is on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Now, Commissioner, we apologize for the fits and starts this morning, but as I've advised participants council, yesterday we received some information from council for the city, listeners, respecting the 30 FE analysis, that's Mr. Kareem's report, on two issues in the 30 FE report, which was inconsistent with some information 30 FE had previously provided to us and which formed a basis for Mr. Brownlee's TNS for his consideration and testimony on those points. Those two issues pertain to the 30 FE collision rate analysis and analysis of the single motor vehicle and rear end collision comparison that 30 FE has in their report. I think that all council agree that the most important thing is putting evidence before the inquiry in a clear and orderly way for your consideration rather than Mr. Brownlee speculating or anticipating what 30 FE has done before hearing about it directly from 30 FE. And as such, council this morning discussed and agreed to proceed as follows, subject to your approval and direction. First is we will proceed today with Mr. Brownlee's continued evidence, but without evidence from him respecting the 30 FE collision rate analysis or single motor vehicle versus rear end collision comparison analysis. I will finish up Mr. Brownlee's evidence in chief today with his opinion respecting the contributory factors to wet road collisions that are outlined in his report. And then participants council will cross-examine Mr. Brownlee on the evidence given to date. On Thursday, Mr. Kareem of 30 FE is scheduled to testify in chief and will do so as scheduled. And in the course of that, we expect that he will provide the explanation for his analysis regarding the collision rates and the SMV versus rear end collision comparison that appear in his report. And then to the extent necessary, at the end of the day on Thursday, Mr. Brownlee would be available to provide his evidence on those two issues. And we'll have to address and consider whether that'll require extending the hearing day on Thursday in some fashion, but we expect we should be able to fit it all in on that day. And so I will be fairly quick finishing up with Mr. Brownlee now, as I described, and participants council got their estimates of approximately 30 minutes each for city council for Golder and council for the city, with minimal time, if any, for council for Dufferin and the MTO. So I expect we would be done today by, shortly after 12 p.m. or thereabouts on a short day. So subject to your direction, that's how we propose to proceed.
Okay, well, if certainly important that we understand Mr. Kareem's evidence. If this is proceeding on the agreement of all council involved, then I think we should adopt that schedule. Let's proceed then to the remainder of Mr. Brownlee's evidence today.
Thank you. So Registrar, if we could pull up Mr. Brownlee's report, Exhibit 221. And if we could go to image 28. Which is page 26 of Mr. Brownlee's report. And so, Mr. Brownlee, you were in your report, you were asked about your comments on the ranking by Mr. Malone of SEMA of the greatest contribution to the inordinate number of wet road crashes. And as he had apparently relayed to Mr. Bogosian, who is a lawyer, and then as recorded in Mr. Bogosian's memo, and that appears in the box in the middle of your page is the excerpt from that Bogosian and Alwyn LLP letter to the city of Hamilton. And then, though, as noted in your report at the bottom, it was Mr. Malone was reported by Mr. Bogosian to have ranked them in the order shown there in those 4 bullets. Mr. Malone, shortly before your report was due, he testified on, I think it was October 31st, as indicated there, that and Mr. Malone clarified in his testimony that he didn't believe that he ranked those contributing factors in any particular order to Mr. Bogosian, although he agreed that they were all contributing factors. And then if we go to the next page, Registrar, maybe we could pull up the next page and keep this page up. And then in the first 2/3 of that page 27, you set out your views with respect to the ranking of those 4 bullets and the contribution to wet road collisions. And we can see your opinion set out there. Does that remain your opinion?
Yes, it does.
And if you could please explain what your views are. We can read what it says, but if you could give us your views, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So when we're completing collision analysis overall in a road network and at a specific site, we typically will look at overrepresentation or dominant collision types of a certain kind. And those will help sort of feed into what contributory factors might be leading to those. So, for example, if we look at rear end collisions approaching an intersection, I would look at a host of different contributory factors. However, if I were to see that wet road surfaces were overrepresented by a significant amount, my attention would immediately turn to pavement friction. So in the 4 bulleted points of Mr. Bogosian's letter outlining what he felt were ranked by Mr. Malone, I agree that compromised road surface conditions or poor road surface conditions, be it whether they are friction of the pavement, bleeding of the pavement, polishing, rutting, something that is compromising the surface of the pavement that may catch motorists by surprise. So when I've been completing reviews over the last 25 years, once I see wet road crashes being overly represented, I immediately turn my attention to pavement surface. Among other things, I mean, I will always keep my mind open to others. Likewise, when we look at those 4 bulleted points, the last one relating to closely spaced and the proximity of on-road or on and off ramps at an interchange, In general, I would rank that near the bottom of those 4 contributory factors. It's one that is still prominent and still can occur in certain situations, but it's definitely not one that I would put at the top. Now, dealing with the two sort of central bullet points, number 2 and number 3, while they're worded differently, they both implicate the road user speeding, the speeds on the roadway and excessive speed, and the horizontal curvature of the roadway. So while the first one appears to speak more to speeding and how that may impact vehicle control around a horizontal curve, the second one talks about the curves first, but then implicates the speeds. So those together, most definitely I would rank number 2. Horizontal curves in general, they do contribute to more collisions than you would on a tangent road section. You've got road users that are attempting to go around a curve. Their attention is away from potentially other hazards and things on the roadway. They are challenged to keep vehicle control and lane keeping around a curve. So we know in the industry that having a curve versus a tangent, you're going to have a higher collision experience at those. But when we look at in my experience, when we look at issues around horizontal curves, our mind is in many cases turned to the delineation of the curve, how abrupt it is, what the motorists perceive, the appropriate operating speed is, the signings, the markings, all those types of things. Rarely do we see snow and slush and other compromised road surfaces sort of coming up as a over proportion of those collisions, because most prudent road users, when they get into gravel, snow, slush, ice, they are going to adjust their speeds both on the tangents and on the horizontal curves. So that usually doesn't sort of rise to the top in a collision history at a curve. However, when we start seeing a large proportion of wet weather collisions, it's something that they would deal with on a routine basis, and something that they may not expect to compromise the road surface and the friction available to them to negotiate that curve significantly on all else being equal. So essentially bringing those two things together, the speed and the horizontal curvature along the Red Hill Valley Parkway, and the motorists being potentially somewhat surprised that they can't operate under a wet weather condition typically like they would be able to, would be what I mentioned on Friday, an expectancy violation.
Okay, and so if I've then understood you do in your view there is the ranking as you described it, although they are nevertheless interrelated because it comes to a question of friction demand in those circumstances. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, except of course on the two areas that Commissioner outlined off the top that we'll deal with on Thursday. And so I would, subject to any questions by you, turn it over first. I believe it was Ms. Roberts was going to graciously go first, and followed by Mr. Chen.
Okay, Ms. Roberts.
Hello, Mr. Brownlee. We have we've been here before. I represent Golder. Registrar, thank you. Can you take that down? I want to first address the issue of design speed and posted speed. You gave evidence in relation to the SEMA analysis in 2015 and their assessment of the numbers of drivers exceeding what they they theorized was the design speed of 110 kilometers per hour. And in your report, you say that based on the actual design speed of 100 kilometers per hour, that would mean with the SEMA data that between 34 and 48% of vehicles were at or exceeding the design speed, given the curvature of the main line. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And that's in reference, when you're looking at the design speed, and just to put it out there, that's all in reference to the guidance in the MTO guide of 1985. That's correct?
It's, I don't know how the operating speeds are related to the guidance.
Sorry, the design speed. When I'm talking about the design speed, you're referring to the design speed for the curvature given the 1985 MTO guide.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And you're aware in 2017 that there was a revision in the TAC guidance to design speed and curvature?
In terms of, that's a pretty broad statement. In terms of what?
In terms of the appropriateness of curvature. Well, let me be specific. One of the curves on the Red Hill is 420 meters. That's correct?
Yes, it is.
Radius. Okay. And under the 2017 TAC guide, at least as I understand it, that a design speed of 100 would not have been considered appropriate under that modern guidance. Do I have that right?
I would have to go back and take a specific look at that.
Okay. It's not one of the documents that are before you, so I don't intend to belabor the point. Okay. Let's go to the issue of expectation and overlapping. What I want to really go to is the issue of overlapping expectation violations. Registrar, can you please go to Appendix C, which is the second last image in Mr. Brownlee's report?
That's me.
Thank you. You've looked at this. This is the Part B, the Phillips designed middle section of the Red Hill.
Yes.
Okay. And you pointed out, and Commission Counsel took you to the evidence of the radius of the turn. So if we're starting on the left side of this page, and assuming we're going northbound to the right, we've got a turn before Green Hill, which is almost a tangent. It's very open, and then we go into a series of 3 turns, 420, 450, and then 690, and then again back to 525. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And in your report on page 21, it's image 23. Registrar, if you can just briefly go to that. This is southbound Red Hill approaching King, and you're looking at the issue of sight lines here.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And I guess the point is that you've got an exit ramp you can see to the right, and you're saying that there's an on-ramp just behind where there's all that foliage.
That is correct, yes.
And the sight distance issue is that as you're driving on the main line, you can't see at this point that there's going to be a ramp going off.
That is correct, and also any interactions with that ramp on and off, yes.
Okay. I think...
Sorry, going off or coming on?
Sorry, coming on, forgive me.
That would be an entry ramp, yes.
Registrar, can you please go to it's Dufferin document 2535. I just want to go to the drawings.
Can you repeat the name of the document, Ms. Roberts, please?
It's Dufferin 2535. There we have them. So these are the drawings produced by Dufferin, which, and this is part B, which are the Phillips drawings. And it's from these drawings that Appendix C annotated drawings were taken. Registrar, can you please go to image 26? Okay. So let's go to, this is coming up to the King Street ramp, but maybe let me go forward once, so just to orient you. Registrar, can you please go forward one image to 28 and see if we can't do this? And one more. And one more, please. Okay. Oh, we've gone too far. Sorry, I want image 27, please. Oh, sorry, I am. Can you hear me? Because okay. All right. Sorry about that. Lost my screen. So, Mr. Brownlee, can you see this? Just to orient you, this is a series of interchanges around King Street.
Yes.
Okay. And now, Registrar, can you go back to 26, please? There we have it. So this is the main line as to the right, it's coming up to King Street. Does that fit with, and I expect you've looked at these drawings many more times than I have, Mr. Brownlee. That's what I understand. Do you think I've got that right?
Yeah, I have my orientations right. The photo that we were just looking at was sort of from the left towards that exit ramp.
Okay.
So this is southbound.
So the bottom is northbound and the top is southbound.
Top is southbound. But the photograph that we were looking at was facing southbound or northbound?
I actually wondered if it wasn't northbound, but Mr. Brownlee, why don't we just look at it? I'm not sure particularly anything turns on that particular photo.
Yeah, that may be my challenge, living on the opposite side of the lake.
Okay.
Do you want, Mr. Brownlee, would it help you to look at that?
I'd have to go in and locate that again.
All right, let's just let me just stick with some points that I'm making. So this if we stick and look at the northbound lanes just at first pass, on the left side of this drawing, there's what I understand to be a railway overpass.
Yes.
Okay, so do I understand it then that the sight distance for that ramp going off to King Street would also have a sight distance challenge because of the overpass?
It may, and that was some of the challenges with looking at design drawings. It's generally what I was showing in my photo there was some of the foliage that was on the inside of the ramp as you're leaving the freeway.
Right. Okay. So, and just for clarity, this is, if I think I've got it right, this is the point at which we've got the 420-meter radius turn. If you look at the apex of that turn on this drawing.
It appears to be, yeah, yes, it is that location.
Okay, so in terms of you've got, if you're driving on the northbound, you've got the railway overpass, you've got an exit going off to King Street, and you've got the tight turns. Are those sort of a summary of the geometric and geometric features?
Yes.
Okay. And Registrar, can you please go to the next image? Thank you. So then we've gone past the ramp going off, and you see here King Street, and you see the ramp going onto the main line at the bottom of this drawing.
Yeah, the previous drawing was coming from the left of this one, and now there is a ramp that's coming on to the Red Hill Valley Creek Parkway.
Okay. And so on the northbound lanes, there's now 3 lanes because the bottom lane becomes a weaving lane.
That's correct.
Okay. And just to touch on it, because I think it's a warrant. So that if you look at the southbound side of the main line here, you've got a ramp you can see from King Street going on the main line.
Yes.
Okay. And this again is another turn in this area, and I think this is the 450-meter radius turn. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that was the one that went through the interchange and beyond, yes.
Okay. And so just so that I understand it, Mr. Brownlee, when you are coming onto the main line from that ramp, this is on the southbound side, you're coming on a turn.
So are you talking about the one to the upper part of the drawing or to the lower?
To the upper part, I'm looking at the southbound right now.
Yeah, yeah, you'd be approaching on a curved ramp onto a curved road section, yes.
Okay, and does that create itself some challenges in terms of sight distance?
Yes, so anytime that you're traveling along a curve, there's potential for sight distance issues on what the available road is ahead. I haven't been able to measure those from the design drawings, but it would create an additional challenge to a tangent road section, yes.
So a driver trying to enter from King Street on the southbound main line has the challenge of navigating the ramp, the continued turn, and has a difficulty in actually seeing oncoming traffic on the main line.
Yes, he or she would be entering into traffic, trying to make that decision while negotiating a curve and trying to maintain their lane. And there potentially would be some sight distance issues there.
Okay.
Yep.
And on the northbound side, again, you've got a ramp coming on to the Red Hill main line. You've got that weaving lane we've identified, and you've got onbound traffic negotiating entrance into the Red Hill on that 450-meter radius turn, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Registrar, can you please go to the next image? So this one is not so exciting. This one just shows the bottom, if I stay on the northbound, we've got 3 lanes, and that shows the weaving lane, the bottom lane between King and Queenston.
Yes.
Okay. And if I understood your testimony, that the distance between the interchanges of the King and the Queenston are the tightest on the Red Hill?
That is correct, yes.
and they're significantly under the recommended guidance of 2 kilometers.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. And just, I think, to orient you for that photograph that you took, I'm assuming that you took it, if on the southbound side, you took it somewhere just past that ramp going off to King Street.
Potentially, I either was approaching King Street on the other end or this end, but that would be the southbound direction, yes.
Okay, so that foliage is somewhere in, likely somewhere in where that ramp in the main line is.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just orienting you. Thanks. Okay, Registrar, can we go down 1 image, please? Go to the next image. All right. So here we have sorry. Okay, so this I think is the ramp to Queenston. And perhaps I didn't address it. So when I talked about the distance between the interchange at King and the interchange at Queenston, here you've got the exit ramp going off to Queenston. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so in that area of the very tight spacing between the interchanges, you had that weaving lane, which is constrained by the distance between those 2 roads.
Yes, we'd have individuals that are trying to enter from the upstream ramp, and other individuals would be attempting to exit at the ramp we have on the screen right now.
And Registrar, can you please go to the next image? All right, so then you can, yeah, it's clearly marks in the top of this drawing. You can see, just to orient you, that it's got the Queenston Road. You've got on the bottom part of the drawing, you've got the ramp from the main line onto Queenston.
Yes.
Right. It looks as though that's a stop sign there. Is that right? Is that a light or something at the exchange with Queenston?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember if that's signalized or not, or it's stop
Okay.
control.
Not important. Okay,
It's a
and again,
3-lane ramp, so I would assume it's signalized, but it may not be.
Okay. And looking at the southbound, so the top of that drawing, there's another ramp from Queenston onto the southbound main line.
That is correct, yes, the loop ramp there.
Okay, and again, just as the other one, in this one, it's I think this is about where the 450 meter radius turn is.
It's, I think, a little further to the
further to right. Okay, so this is 690.
Yeah, that would, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I don't have the overall plan in front of me, but the 450 is through the King Street interchange.
Sorry, it's farther to the north.
To the south.
Sorry, yes, you're right. The turn is 690 there, and then it goes into 525 on the other side of that interchange.
Right.
Okay, that's right. Thank you. Okay, so just looking at the southbound, again, we've got an issue with a ramp coming onto the main line on a curve.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and again, just as you explained when we were looking at the ramp onto King Street, that creates challenges in terms of sight distance for both drivers on the main line as well as for people trying to go onto the main line from the ramp.
If there is where the orange markings are, if there's any kind of vertical features there, trees, any kind of structures or anything that's going to block the sight lines. But otherwise, if that area is relatively open, the merge would be pretty typical, other than it's on a curve, as you pointed out.
Okay. Thank you, Registrar. You can take that down. Can you please go back to the appendix to Mr. Brownlee's report, which is the second last image? I want to look at just look at the whole thing again. Thank you, Registrar. Okay, so I took you to the drawings that are the details for individual portions that you can see on this drawing. What I want to try and understand, because your report talks about expectation violations in terms of speed and the radius of the turns and the interchanges. When I look at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you've got though is you've got overlapping expectancy violations, particularly in this area around King and Queenston. You've got a speed at the maximum for the design. You've got tight curvature, close interchanges, tight weaving distances. And although you haven't been able to measure the site expectancy, you clearly have some challenges in terms of site distances. So you don't have one issue of expectancy. You have a number of them all at the same time, do you not?
Yeah, this is obviously one of the more challenging areas in the design of the Red Hill, and we are bringing together, closely spaced interchanges, weaving sections. We're going to have vehicles that are trying to negotiate the curves. They are going to be coming up on vehicles that are entering and or exiting, and they need to sort of monitor their progress, and are they going to be in conflict with you as you travel along this freeway section. And putting interchanges close together is also going to cause potentially congestion, especially if there's any kind of turbulence with the weaving sections. So there could be potentially a greater probability of congestion and backup and slowed or stopped vehicles, speeds that you may not expect on a free flow facility.
And do those factors come together to create a circumstance, as you described it, as effectively a very high demand on the driver? In this corridor, it's the higher demand area of this corridor, yes. In terms of workload, yes. I think we're speaking of motorist workload. I'm trying to understand your language, and Mr. Brownlee. Okay, Registrar, could we please go to Dr. Flinch's report? That's EXP 191. I think it's Exhibit 220. Page 7, which I think will be image 9. Thank you. Right. So in the paragraph just below this, figure 2, it looks at the ARA. Dr. Flinch starts to discuss the ARA measurements that were taken in 2019 before the Red Hill was resurfaced, and his report says in that that paragraph that the average friction remained approximately the same level as when the MTO performed its final testing in 2014, and the average FN90 for the 4 lanes range between 31 and 35. Do you see that?
I see it, yes.
Okay. And if Registrar, can you please go image 11? So this is a figure where we've plotted the ARA. Wait. Oh, I've got page 9. Page 9, please, Registrar. Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to stay on your image, on the image numbers, and we're a bit scrambled between us. Okay, so this is Dr. Flinch plotting the ARA test results. And again, what you can see is he's plotted it against the locations. And when I look at this, it appears that the friction, just as he's described, is hovering a little above 30, a couple of places a little below. But in that Greenhill, King Street, Queenston on the northbound lane, it's in that range. Is that what you see?
It's hard to tell from all these points. I think it would be better for Mr. Flinch to answer the question about what the percentage or what the values are in there. I mean, it's a pretty random plot.
Okay, so he says in his report that they are averaging between 31 and 35. And my point is that that the friction isn't particularly variable on the Red Hill. The average is in fact pretty consistent. Dr. Flinch and Dr. Uzarowski describe the friction on the Red Hill as relatively low, and Mr. Hine, who's the expert for the city, says he disagrees and says, well, that analysis is too conservative and that friction's within the norm in Ontario. My point is that friction's not changing, but if we go to let's just go to a different document, Registrar. Let's go to the roadside safety assessment. That's Hamilton 54495. Thank you. Can you please go to page 10, which I think it's image 16. It's section 3.1.5, collisions by location. Thank you. Okay. So this evidence is in various places, and I'm assuming, Mr. Brownlee, that you've looked pretty closely at the location of accidents, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I was looking at different plots in this potentially another SEMA report, but yeah, I can see there's a trend here. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to point to the obvious here is that around the area Greenhill to King, and King, particularly on in the main line, you've got location of accidents being quite high on this area, which we've just looked at, where there are a significant number of geometric challenges.
Yes.
Okay. So you've taken us through the evidence. Richard, you can take that down. Thank you. You've taken us through the evidence of the factors which create expectancy violations on the Red Hill in this area, Greenhill, King, Queenston. The friction, and we've looked at that in it, and it's clear that that overlaps with significant numbers of accidents, correct?
Sorry, I missed that last combination.
That the location that I've taken you through which has the high number of expectation violations in the geometry speed that we've gone through in some detail, also correlates with areas in which there are significantly higher numbers of accidents, correct?
That is correct, yes. There's
Okay.
some correlation for sure.
And I've taken you to Dr. Flinch's evidence that the friction doesn't change in those areas, right? So I just want to dig into your conclusion in your report, identifying surface friction as the primary contributing cause to the high and overrepresentation of wet weather crashes. Friction's not changing, so I don't understand how you get there. Why do you say that friction should be the primary contributing cause?
To wet weather collisions, or wet road collisions? Yes. So the reason we're seeing that specific trend in those areas is that's where the greatest demand for friction is. When you're traveling along a straight road section with a relatively gentle grade, you're not starting, stopping, or turning. When you get into more challenging topography and you want to change lanes, and there's others that are doing the same, that is where you're going to be demanding the friction. The expectancy violation is that during what we consider routine weather conditions, not snowstorms and freezing rain and things of that nature, we have motorists that feel they're traveling at an appropriate speed and being able to negotiate curves at based on their experience and their expectations. In those cases are being challenged.
Okay, and that's because the consequence of the expectancy violations in those locations is that there's a very high demand on friction.
There is a higher demand on friction when you're going around curves and when you're dealing with interchanges, yes.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Brownlee. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
So if I can try, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but effectively you're saying that in those areas, use of the threshold of FN 30 may not be appropriate because in those areas, the friction demand that a highway should respond to would be higher. Is that fair?
In general, yeah. I mean, motorists are traveling at speeds that they feel are comfortable for their vehicle, that they've had it in the past when they are dealing with, trying to stop for slowed vehicles to jockey around a vehicle entering onto the highway. They're going to be demanding friction, and they sort of have an expectation of what that is, and the risks they're going to take in terms of how close they're following other vehicles, how aggressive they might turn to get off of a ramp that they didn't realize was happening so quickly. And that would be the expectancy violation, that their vehicle doesn't handle like it should because of reduced friction values, in part.
Put another way, given the way a driver would be expected to negotiate these areas, that includes speed and in particular, you're saying the demand for friction would be higher because there may be more stops and starts or weaving and turning.
That is correct. I'm sorry.
That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Give me just a moment to make my notes.
What does it say, Mr. Chair?
And broadly, if I understand your evidence, there are two principal factors. One would be, if I can lump them all together, other driver behavior, weaving, slowing down, congestion, which might involve stopping and the like. And the other would be issues specific to the particular motorist that translate into shorter stopping or sight distances and related issues of geometry negotiating a curve upon entering from a curved on ramp and similar instances. Is that broadly correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Mr. Chen is up next for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Commissioner, may I proceed?
Yes, please do, Mr. Chen.
Thank you. Mr. Brownlee, I am one of the lawyers for the city of Hamilton. If we could just start kind of going back to the understanding with respect to the guidelines, and I wanted to clarify some of those points. I take it you agree, Mr. Brownlee, that the MTO design guide, they're not guides that municipalities are required to follow?
No, they can choose to follow them. It's a provincial manual, and some choose to apply that manual, others choose to apply other standards and guidance.
Yeah, they are there for guidance. I think that's the word you just used.
Yes.
Okay. And those guides provide what may be typical or the beginning points of a particular design criteria.
Yes.
Right. And within that parameter, there may be design exceptions.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And so a particular design criteria would allow for exceeding or deviating from what is typical.
Yeah, if properly assessed and built into the design, overall design, yes.
Right, and so when we talk about properly assessed, these guidelines permit engineering judgment to be applied to address constraints or obstacles that may arise when you're applying it to the real world. I think is the word you've used.
Yes, that's what I said.
Right, to adjust to real world conditions, something to that effect, right?
Yes.
And it's not always the case that one framework would fit every roadway.
No, there's going to be variations throughout your design.
Okay. So yeah, those are the points I wanted to clarify for the guidelines. Now, turning to design speed, and in your report, and we can bring it up, it is image 6, EXP 192. Oh, sorry, image 4. Sorry about that. Right, thank you. So here you talk about the MTO design guide, in the context of roadway speed, and just in the first paragraph there, you say the guide in the third line, the guide does not provide prescriptive guidance on selecting or posting speed limits. You see that?
That is correct.
Right. And we can agree that the 1985 MTO design guide was the governing design document for the Red Hill when it was designed.
That's my understanding, yes.
And so in that guide, it provides the general guidance and ranges for selecting design speeds and posted speeds.
It provides general guidance, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't provide prescriptive guidance on selecting or posting speed limits.
It provides a range of values that can be provided, and then it provides additional guidance on top of that.
Right. So this kind of goes back to applying, professional engineering judgment in terms of, what value, what speed limit to use based on the guidance.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's recognized that there may be circumstances in which the general guidance set out in the design guide simply can't be followed. There
might be some geometric challenges, topography, other constraints on a project where you may not be able to, for the entire section or very specific areas, not be able to meet that standard. So there's a number of ways of dealing with that, is to look at the overall design and the design speed that you're going to choose, or to design a specific component to a lesser value and sign and mark it and provide warnings. So that's the two ways that a transportation practitioner can deal with areas that are particularly challenged.
Okay, understood. But here, as I understand it, you agree that the 100 kilometers per hour design speed, it was within the range of the design speed identified for freeways?
It was in the range that was permitted, yes.
Yeah, and as I recall your evidence on Friday, you're not challenging, the engineering judgment of the planners of the Red Hill.
No, I wasn't there, and I don't know what, I can read what some of their challenges were, but I obviously can't appreciate all the different pieces that they were trying to incorporate into the design while meeting some other high priority criteria for the community.
Okay. And then in your report, you talk about SEMA and their recommendations and their understanding of the design speed. If you can turn to image 6, please. So you say in that first paragraph, it's the fourth line, that SEMA had been advised of the actual design speed. They would have identified significant disparities between the posted design and operating speeds, and potentially adjusted their scope assumptions and so on. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so just looking at table 5, which is right below that paragraph, RHVP operating speeds, the first row states that the average speed of the Red Hill northbound is 95 kilometers per hour, and southbound is 99 kilometers per hour, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that a change in the assumed design speed does not impact the average speed identified in that first row?
Well, the average speed is something that's measured in
Right.
the field, so
it wouldn't impact.
I'm not sorry.
If there's a change in the design speed, that first row doesn't affect the numbers in the first row.
It would impact the way you would perceive those numbers.
Right, but those
if you have 110 kilometer design speed and you have 50% on average, roughly, doing less than that, that doesn't cause you too much concern. If now you are dealing with 100 kilometer hour design speed, those numbers, now we got 50% of the people that are approximately getting close to exceeding that.
Yeah, no, that's a separate explanation for a different question. All I'm asking you is these two numbers in the first row will not change. I think we agree on that. I know you're telling me how they're perceived. I'm just asking you if these numbers would change if the assumed
They wouldn't change to those are based on what road users are traveling at on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. They don't know what the design speed is. However, it would change how somebody completing a operational review or a safety review of that corridor would look at those numbers for sure.
No, I appreciate that's your view.
I think you're looking for the first part, which is the road user doesn't know what the design speed is. They're traveling at a free flow speed of what they feel is appropriate. And the average speed that you see there is what is a result of those choices.
Yeah, so it's I thought my question was simple. The numbers here won't change if the assumed design speed, it changes.
That is correct.
I think we're on the same page. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Good. So the second row, 85th percentile speed. It's 110 kilometers per hour.
Sorry, Mr. Chen, I don't normally like to interject, but since I'm going to have this question at the end, and it sort of impacts the line of questioning that you're following, I think I should put it to Mr. Brownlee now. In the paragraph above, as you pointed out, Mr. Brownlee's suggesting that if I'm not suggesting the word change of design speed is correct. I think that's wrong or misleading. But if in fact SEMA had been advised that the actual design speed was 100 rather than 110, he says that could have affected, among other things, potential remedial actions. And if I understand Mr. Brownlee's analysis, that could then have an impact on the average speed. Is that correct, Mr. Brownlee?
Depending on the remedial actions, yes.
Depending upon the remedial action, a change in the speed, posted speed, or large warning signs or something of that sort.
Yes.
So there is an interrelationship here that I think the last question and answer didn't really address.
So, Mr. Commissioner, my question was simply looking at the first row and whether that number would change if SEMA was aware that the design speed was 100 kilometers per hour.
Right, and as I understood that, I've understood Mr. Brownlee's answer to be, the answer is potentially.
I understood
if there had been, as a result of that, SEMA would have recommended remedial actions, which when implemented would have affected the average speed, then the answer is, under those circumstances, it could have had an effect.
So no, I appreciate Mr. Brownlee is talking about the effect and the recommendations. My question is focused on the table specifically, and as I understand what Mr. Brownlee had indicated, that the average speed row is simply setting out the measured speed of the study that was.
Yeah, well, why don't you proceed with your questions? Okay.
Am I correct about that, Mr. Brownlee, that the average speed would be providing the measured speed at the time of the study? That's what this table is.
Yeah, it's essentially the speed, the average speed of those making choices of their operating speed on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And most of the motoring public doesn't know what design speed is. They know that they can exceed the speed limit by a certain amount within reasonable margin of safety. But if I asked anybody what their design speed was outside of this group today, they probably wouldn't know.
Right. And so when you say, had SEMA known about the design speed being 100 kilometers an hour, and you've provided the additional statistic of 34 to 48, percentage of of vehicles, perhaps that row would change. But the 85th percentile speed, the average speed, those two are measured speeds. They wouldn't change.
Those are based on what motorists are making choices on. Yes.
Okay, right. And then the third row, exceeding speed limit, that shows 60% for northbound and 72 for southbound. That's referring to the posted speed limit. That's what
that is correct. Yes.
And I think we can agree that the correct posted speed at the time and SEMA knew was 90 kilometers an hour.
Yes.
Okay.
They documented that.
Right. And then looking at the last row in this table, exceeding 140 kilometers an hour, that states that over 500 vehicles a day are traveling at speeds exceeding 140 kilometers, correct?
That's what it suggests, yes.
Right. And again, this is another line that would not be impacted, had SEMA known that the design speed was 100. That's measured.
It's measured, but it is a pretty stark contrast to 100-kilometer-hour design speed. 40 kilometers over the design speed would definitely heighten my interest, and I think most transportation practitioners.
Right, and it's at 50 kilometers an hour, if I have my math right, over the posted speed limit.
Would even heighten us our attention to that particular component and how it may impact collisions, yes.
Right, and 30 kilometers per hour over the design speed would also be significant. You agree?
I would agree, yes.
Okay. And so we talked about the disparities, and by looking at rows, 1, 2, 3, and 5, we can agree that based on that, SEMA would have seen a relatively significant disparity between at least the posted speed and the exceeding 140 kilometers speed. If I can put it that way. Okay.
Yes.
And so SEMA would have had all of that information and could have taken that into account when developing the recommendations that they made in the 2015 SEMA report.
They would have taken into account, they may have paid attention to more specific things such as geometry, knowing that some of the components were designed a little right down to the minimums of the design speeds of the day. Because not everything's just based on operating speeds. You're looking at a number of contributory factors along this corridor, everything from surface conditions, clear zones, geometry, all those things. So had they been aware of the design speed of 100 kilometers an hour, they may have focused on some different areas, including geometry.
And I take it we can agree that the geometry on the roadway, the markings, the barriers, they are what they are on the Red Hill Valley Parkway, regardless of whether they at the time of SEMA doing the assessment, regardless of whether they understood that design speed was 100 or 110, right?
Well, yeah, that was what was constructed. I mean, that's what we're trying to agree on.
Okay.
That's what looks out in the field, yes.
Yeah. And when it comes to selecting a design speed, take it we can agree that the common practice is to select a design speed of 10 or 20 kilometers over the posted speed limit for a paved roadway.
Yes, that's I've written that in many reports.
Yeah, including in your primer. I actually took it from your primer, to be fair.
Yeah.
And we can agree that common practice would be known by SEMA. They've been in the industry for some time.
Yes, they'd be aware of it.
Right. And that common practice is likely why SEMA assumed the design speed to be 110.
The common practice of posting higher order roadways such as arterials and freeways, 20 kilometers and over, is where I assume that they made that assumption.
Right.
Sorry for the double assumption, but
no problem. And I take it you agree that it would be fairly obvious that the percentage for those traveling at or exceeding the design speed, right, would increase if the design speed was lower than what was assumed.
that is correct. Yeah.
Right.
All else being equal.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that the percentage to go down if you lower the design speed.
No, because the operating speed is what it is, and if you
Correct.
change the other one, yeah, it's going to change the percentage.
And can we agree that SEMA didn't state in the report that if their assumed design speed is, incorrect, that their conclusion would change?
Generally, I mean, while we always make provisions in our reports, if things change, that our conclusions may change. I don't know if you would. I would have expected them to comment on if the design speed changes. They had an assumed design speed that they were evaluating, and that's what they carried through their report. I'm not sure there would. I've never seen somebody that didn't say, well, if the design speed changes and the posted speed changes, my opinions all change. I generally don't see statements of that nature.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Brownlee, I put it to you that if SEMA was in fact concerned about their conclusions changing because the design speed, there would be a change in the design speed at 100 kilometers instead of 110, they would have identified that to the city in the report going to them.
Well, they're working forward on an assumption that they thought was correct. I don't know if they would need to put all those provisos in there for every component of their evaluation.
Right. It was an assumption. They assumed the design speed.
It was assumed, yeah, based on industry practice.
So just moving on to interchange spacing, Mr. Brownlee.
Yes.
You comment that the majority of interchanges on the Red Hill were spaced less than specified.
Yes.
Right. And in your report, when you say less than specified, you mean that the interchanges on the Red Hill Valley Parkway were spaced less than the general guidance in the design guide?
That is correct.
Right. And we have agreed that the design guide is not prescriptive.
That is correct. Yes.
And that concept applies to the general ranges for interchange spacing as well, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be occasions where you make a deviation for specific interchange spacing.
Right. And just with interchanges, one of the constraints that may apply is the reality of the locations of the pre-existing arterial roadways by which traffic will access.
Yeah, that's recognized in the manual. Yes.
Okay. And in the case of the Red Hill, at the time that it was built, the city's system of arterial roads is already in place, or by and large, it was in place.
Yes.
Yeah. So, not all the roadways, the city roadways, but which traffic needed to gain access to the Red Hill were, ideally spaced at 2 to 3 kilometer intervals as a result of that.
That is correct.
Okay. And during your evidence last Friday, you were shown a table of the interchange spacing for other urban freeways. I take it you agree that on other urban freeways, we've seen cases where they are less than the 2 kilometers from the MTO design guide.
Yes, there are interchanges that are closer spaced, albeit they're not, in some cases, full interchanges.
Understood. And okay, moving on to the contributory factors topic that we touched on last week and today. So your point relates to the overrepresentation of specific collision attributes for wet weather collisions, correct?
Yes.
And as I understand it, overrepresentation has a specific meaning in road safety.
Yes, it does.
So when you're assessing whether there's an overrepresentation, you are looking at whether there's an inordinate frequency of a specific collision attribute when compared to paired transportation facilities, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right. And so just to break that down, of course, you need an inordinate frequency. So that's, can I interpret that to mean a material discrepancy of some sort?
Yes.
Right. And then when we say specific collision attribute, that could be rear ends, wet weather, that type of thing.
Yes.
Okay. And then a pair facility would be a roadway or a segment of a roadway with similar characteristics to the one you're concerned about.
It could be. There's different comparisons you can make, like to the overall experience in a community or within a road network, or to very specific attributes related to a signalized intersection.
Good. And so can we bring up image 29? It's a bit small. Footnote 58, Mr. Brownlee, that's the definition when we think of overrepresentation.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Mr. Registrar. I think throughout this inquiry, we've been using the phrase, we want to compare apples to apples. I take it you agree with that?
Yes.
Right. And if you don't compare to a paired transportation facility, then given the definition, you can't conclude that there's an overrepresentation, right, as that term is used in the road safety field.
Depending on the analysis and the attribute that you're actually looking at, you can make comparisons without having peer transportation facilities that are exactly the same. Like looking at rear end collisions approaching a signalized intersection. It's a good example.
Right.
To have exact same attributes between them and to do a before and after study, if I see 50% of the collisions occurring on one approach of a signalized intersection, there's something potentially going on beyond regular motorist operations. There's geometric or other attributes that are contributing to that specific dominant collision type. I don't need to do a university-based 50 site evaluation to tell you that that's an overrepresented dominant collision type. Likewise, something more familiar to this, if I see 50%, 40% wet weather collisions at an intersection, on a road section, on a freeway, that's going to pique my interest. That's not something I see every day in my analysis. Do I need a study of peer locations to tell me that that's something pretty substantial? after 25 years, no, that's something that would speak to me right away.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is that you may not always have the ideal circumstance. You might not always have the full data set. That's correct.
Sorry, I'm misunderstanding the question.
But let me try to rephrase that. I mean, we've talked about your definition, which is set out in footnote 58, correct?
Yes, yes.
And when we're doing an overrepresentation analysis, we have to at least look at a paratransportation facility, correct?
Or yeah, a system of transportation facilities, yes. So
sorry,
if
I missed that. Like, what
a
kind of
system of transportation facilities, yeah, like a network.
Yeah, okay.
And your experience in dealing with other networks and analysis over a period of time to look at the dominant or the percentages, the distribution of collisions over days of the week, surface conditions, lighting conditions, etc. Likewise, I mean, that's a good example is illumination. If there's a large percentage of collisions that are occurring during dark weather conditions or dark lighting conditions, we generally know where that should sit in the grand scheme of things when we're looking at an intersection or whether it be a road section and whether it's overrepresented or not.
But we can agree that when you're looking at the roads in those networks, you should at least have similar characteristics, going back to the apples to apple concept, right?
For certain, yeah, if you're dealing with certain small amounts, but there's some that, yeah, generally you'd like to have a good peer transportation facility to compare it to and a series of sites. Yes,
right.
That's what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yes, I think I think we're on the same.
But do we need the exact replica, 10 different sites to be able to compare that to? Not necessarily. Some of the collision attributes will speak from the data that are inordinately out of the range that we typically would expect them on any component of the road network.
And just trying to understand your report, and perhaps you can clarify it for me. Your report doesn't provide an over-representation analysis of wet weather collisions on the Red Hill, correct?
No, we weren't asked to do any independent analysis.
Okay.
We relied on the 5-year collision analysis that CEMA had prepared.
Right. Sorry, and now I'm a bit confused by. So you didn't undertake a overrepresentation analysis.
No, I relied on others that prepared that on behalf of the city of Hamilton.
And so I know I've seen in the CEMA report reference to provincial and municipal averages. Is that what you're referring to when you say you relied on other analysis?
Yes, they looked at the statistical significance between those data sets and the Red Hill, yes.
Right, and those talk about all roads, correct? Those provincial averages, they're all roads?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and you made reference to various statements of expectancy violations in the highway safety manual on Friday. Do you recall those statements?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Brownlee, I take it you have some familiarity with that manual then?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Could we call that up, which is HAM 64754? Perhaps we can go to image 3. Mr. Brownlee, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just in the first paragraph, A.1, purpose of the HSM. Just generally, do you agree, Mr. Brownlee, that the focus of the HSM is to provide quantitative information for decision making?
From a safety perspective, yes.
Right. In other words, it's a way to make data-driven decisions.
You got the right term, yes.
All right. And then just jumping to the next paragraph, A.2, first sentence. It says, prior to this edition of the HSM, transportation professionals did not have a single national resource for quantitative information about crash analysis and evaluation. Do you agree with that statement?
Not a single national source, no. The components were spread out, essentially.
And so this highway safety manual, or the highway safety manual, was developed in or around 2010?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So you and I can agree that from a timing perspective, the highway safety manual was not available as a resource when the Red Hill Valley Parkway was designed.
Not in its packaged state, but some of the industry knowledge definitely would be in and around then.
Yep.
It didn't just pop up. It was stuff that was percolated for a number of years in research studies that have been around for years, and they were packaged together in addition to some new research as well.
Yeah, and I don't intend to take you through the entire 1,000-page manual.
I hope not.
there is a history section of how it all came together.
Yes.
But if we can go to image 4. It's the fourth paragraph. Just make sure I have it right here. Starting at line 77, Mr. Registrar, can we 77 to 87, if we could call that out. Mr. Brownlee, starting the fourth line. It says that there's no such thing as absolute safety. I take it you agree with that general proposition?
Yes.
And that there is risk in all highway transportation. A universal objective is to reduce the number and severity of crashes within the limits of available resources, science, technology, and legislated mandated priorities. That fair?
That's what it says, yes.
All right. And now just turning to one of the purposes of the highway safety manual, as I understand, we can bring this down. Thank you, Mr. Registrar. One of the purposes of the highway safety manual is to identify factors that contribute to crashes. Is that one thing it does?
Yes.
Okay. So I apologize, Mr. Registrar. I just meant the call out. If we could bring that document back up at image 238 and 239. Okay, so it's at the bottom left of your screen. Mr. Brownlee, there's a section called contributing factors for consideration. You see that?
Yes. Yep.
And it starts with examples of contributing factors associated with a variety of crash types are provided in the following sections. And the examples may serve as a checklist to verify that a key contributing factor is not forgotten or overlooked. Do you see that?
Yeah, it says examples, so it's not meant to be a complete list. I know they call it a checklist, but it's very high level.
Right. But it does say it's a checklist to verify that a key contributing factor is not forgotten and it's not purporting to set out every contributing factor. If you read on.
That is correct.
Okay. If we can turn now to image 240. Okay, this shows exhibit 6-3, possible crash contributing factors along roadway segments.
Yes.
And so if we go down 1, 2, 3, 4 for crash type, you see wet pavement,
Yes, I do.
right? And it lists out 4 possible contributing factors.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, and the first one is pavement design, e.g. drainage and permeability. Second is inadequate pavement markings. Third is inadequate maintenance. And the fourth is excessive speed.
Correct.
Is that what you see?
That's what I see.
Okay, and we can agree that friction is not listed as one of the key contributing factors that the HSM has identified?
Well, the EG does not contain it only to those 2 factors that they're putting in there. Pavement design, you've heard from Mr. Flinch, includes pavement friction, it includes drainage, it includes permeability, it's cross slope, a whole lot of things. So I realize that somebody that isn't within the road safety field or hasn't been very long may construe that to be strictly drainage and permeability, but I can guarantee you that a transportation practitioner with sufficient experience, when they look at wet pavement conditions as being overrepresentative, would not turn their mind away from the surface conditions.
I take it you were referring to me when you were talking about someone not in the industry, but perhaps I can point out to you that in this particular exhibit, you'll see the reference to slippery pavement as a separate. Yes. You agree with that, right?
Yes. Okay. And one of the areas that it's identified is single vehicle run off the road collisions.
Mr. Commissioner, if I can have 5 minutes just to take a look at my notes.
Yeah, by all means.
Commissioner, should we go off to breakout rooms for this, or?
I'm assuming Mr. Chen is able to go through his notes fairly quickly.
Okay.
I'm quite prepared. Maybe what we might do is actually take a 5-minute break. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Okay, we'll give Mr. Chen a little easier task rather than have the rest of us looking at him while he's reviewing his notes.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break, and if it's now 12:35, return at 12:40.
Mr. Commissioner, just a couple of questions on a different topic.
Go ahead.
Now, Mr. Brownlee, you talked about the concept of expectancy violation, and in particular with respect to speed, design speed.
Yes.
Okay, and just to go back, when we talk about expectancy violation, we are referring in part to the expectation of drivers that are formed by what they see on the roadway and the environment. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
So that would include things like curvature as an example. You see the curve coming up, so you process that.
Yes. Yes.
And is it fair to say that a driver forms an expectation of how fast they should be driving on a given roadway based on what they see around them?
Yep. The alignment of the roadway, the distances on the side, the widths of the lane, all those types of things. Yes.
Yeah. So it's with respect to the speed, it's formed based in part on the physical attributes of the roadway.
Yes.
Right. And is it fair to say that a main way of addressing a potential expectancy violation with speed, at least, is to put up speed limit signs along the highway?
It assists to a certain extent. Yes.
And the posted speed on the Red Hill, which we covered earlier, not now, but before, was 90 kilometers an hour.
That is correct.
And the posted speed on a 400 series, that's typically 100?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And would repeating speed limit signs along the highway kind of serve as a consistent reminder to the driver?
We would hope so, yes, but the motorists still make the decisions based on what they think their tolerances are, the conflicts around them, and the roadway environment. So,
but they are there for that purpose.
They are there for that purpose, yes.
And when we're thinking about speed limit signs as providing warning, putting them near or close to physical attributes, like a curve, that may also help to manage expectations.
If the posted speed is appropriate for that curve and they understand their operating speeds that they can travel through that curve, yes.
Okay. And in addition to speed limit signs, I take it the presence of speed enforcement would also manage driver expectation?
When it's present, yes.
Yeah. And can we agree that drivers who drive onto the Red Hill Parkway from an adjacent highway would encounter a road sign that says Red Hill Valley Parkway?
Potentially, they may. I'm not sure. I haven't done an evaluation of the guide signs, but.
Okay. Well, all I'm saying is a driver knows that they're entering the Red Hill Valley Parkway.
I actually don't know if they actually have signs that say Red Hill Valley Parkway.
Okay.
I apologize.
So okay, that fair enough. Just before I leave that point, a sign that says whether it's the Don Valley Parkway or the Red Hill Valley Parkway, that may be something that impacts the expectancy of a driver.
I don't think a road name is going to change their opinion. Most people don't know if they're driving on a provincial highway or a county road. They don't make that distinction. They base it on the physical attributes of the roadway and what they feel is appropriate for the conditions that they're driving through and any kind of hazards they may encounter and what an appropriate operating speed is. They are going to take into account the posted speed in that evaluation, but it's only one of the considerations. We see it on freeways where they've got an 80-kilometer posted speed for construction zone. I challenge you to find anybody who's doing 80 kilometers an hour if there's no pertinent reason, geometric feature, or operating condition that's going to make them change their speed.
Right. But if the sign is there that says Red Hill Valley Parkway, that forms, and they see it, that forms part of their expectations, correct?
Potentially if they live in Hamilton or they watch the news. But anybody who's not familiar with Hamilton, I'd be challenged for them to understand that there's actually a Red Hill Valley Parkway, and it has a certain difference than other freeways that they would drive on a regular basis. And the motoring public is not that knowledgeable, I don't think, unless, as I said, you're local to the area.
I would like to give them a bit more credit than that. Someone who sees a sign that says Red Hill Valley Parkway is not going to think that they're driving on the 400, like a 400 series, right?
It looks like a 400. It's a controlled access freeway, which has a certain flavor to it. They don't need to worry about stop signs and traffic signals. They have interchanges that would be coming up and would be well signed so that you have advance warning. They're going to select the speed that they feel comfortable under a controlled access freeway environment.
Yeah. And along the Red Hill Valley Parkway, and we've touched on this, there are certain notices and markings, or the speed limit signs that are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of providing notice.
They're definitely notified that it's a 90-kilometer-hour posted speed. Yes.
And it's not. Is it fair to say that it's not an individual, sign? It's kind of the cumulative effect, or the combination of different signage and markings that can work together to manage expectations. Is that fair?
I'm not sure what markings you're referring to.
I just mean, the speed limit signs being repeated, speed enforcement, seeing that a curve is coming up. When we talk about driver expectation, we're not focused on the singular effect. We can also think about it in a cumulative effect.
Yes, they're taking all those things into consideration as they're driving down the roadway and selecting their speed.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brownlee. Those are my questions.
Okay. Mr. Lewis?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, then I take it that we're through for the day, and we'll adjourn tomorrow we'll adjourn until tomorrow at 9:30. Before we go, thank you, Mr. Brownlee, for attending yet again. I gather you may still be required on Thursday, so we'll wait to see whether there's any further testimony we require from you. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your assistance and your testimony. And we'll stand adjourned then until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask the registrar to, can I have briefly an all council breakout room? And if you could put Mr. Brownlee into Commission Council's room just so we can talk logistics. Thank you.